Good leadership means having the courage to sometimes piss people off.
This is the Role Player Podcast.
You know, like my knowledge of you is that you're very passionate about empowering women and getting them to stand up for themselves. And so your input on this issue is interesting, because you were talking about how your first instinct is to believe the female, which I think is fair, because there's a lot of sexual assault that happens, right? Especially if it comes out timely, right? Like it happened. But all of these historic allegations, like what are your thoughts on how we should deal with that?
I mean, I just think it's such a difficult and like hot button topic to navigate this, because for so much of those like younger formidable years, you know, like coming out of high school and going into university, I really aligned with the word feminist. Like I didn't want to be minimized into, you know, just being a girl and, you know, just raising children. Like when I looked at my male peers, like I felt as smart or smarter, and like I was just as capable to get things done. So like at that time I was very passionate about that, but I didn't know. But that wasn't at the expense of hating men. And I think that's kind of where this has gone is I don't hate men. But by also being a feminist doesn't mean that I'm also pro any woman, right? Like we have to have a shared set of values, and we have to agree to what we're fighting for. And
we're not football teams.
Yeah,
it's not like you're a Cowboys fan versus a Packers fan,
it's not
right?
It's like anti-opposite gender.
I'm kind of good person fan.
Me too.
Understanding that they exist across the spectrum of sexualities and genders.
Yes.
There are people that give more than they take. There are people.
I would say it's never been a better time in the Western world to be a woman. And most men that I come across in business, and I come across most men in business, not only tend to be great, but actually tend to be better than the women I meet in business. I find actually the women in business tend to be the worst. And I think that goes back to how you introed this.
In terms of taking people down, like
how they treat me, how they want me to fail, how they set me up to be embarrassed in rooms where they're situated to be comfortable. Because with owning an agency, we are brought in always as a third party and as a consultant, and I'm never respected for my expertise. I'm always minimized that I slept with someone to get here, or I didn't earn it, or I'm somebody's daughter. Like I can't be there as an expert that earned it on my own. And
you're saying women are more aggressive on that sense than the men? Because I've seen you, like the men actually pick up on your intelligence quickly.
Men respect me almost right away.
Yeah.
And I hate to use generalized language. Like I could actually probably count on one hand women that I've been on the opposite side of the table of in business interactions that have actually been professional. It's so few.
Or who gave you the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? Like you can see like a little bit of more scrutiny than the dudes, like because your language is often very intelligent. But
that's why I would say it's actually pure evil.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't want to say this. I don't want it to be the truth. But it's sadly what I've experienced. And at first I thought it was like because I was young and entering the industry. And then when it happened for the 50th time, it's now an archetype. Like I now know how they get into those CMO positions or into C-suite. Like but that's even a separate conversation. I think the reason why I brought that up is by being proximate to you for many years, aware of like learning. I mean, I think learning about cases in law as, you know, an average citizen that's always respected the police and always thought nothing like that could ever happen to you. It was really eye-opening and crazy to see the pain and the suffering that people have gone through, whether it's in the criminal system or the personal injury system. And you see a lot of pain and suffering in your job.
I wanted to touch on this, and maybe this becomes a clip later or whatever. It's just both genders have the capacity to be evil and to destroy people's lives, right? And men have had the monopoly on physical violence, just by virtue of size, access to weapons, and all of that. But women have had the ability to destroy with words. They can tear you down with words. They can undermine your position if you're a female.
I understand power games.
But what we've done in today's society, trying to protect women from physical violence, which is honorable, and we need to raise children who understand that. But you've allowed them to weaponize words. And so if a man can use violence to perpetrate a crime for his own interest, a woman can perpetrate violence with words for her own interest. And that is captured perfectly in wrongful allegations, where somebody can bring something up that they said happened 10 years ago. And in many cases, something did happen 10 years ago. But there is going to be a percentage of those historic cases where it's now a weaponized use of words to perpetrate violence against somebody they don't like. And until you have been the target of a wrongful allegation in which you're now presumed guilty and your life is destroyed, you're fired, you're canceled, you become a pariah, because all somebody has to do is issue 100 words to a police officer.
I just think it's interesting. It's important to just give a quick insertion to this. The reason why I was bringing up the pain and suffering piece and like just seeing all the pain in these cases is that more often than not, the pain inflicted or caused is not the person's fault who's experiencing it. And that's why it makes it hard to contemplate or to understand why someone would construct or ruin someone's life if something didn't happen. And that's been a really difficult thing for my brain to wrap around. And I think for men as well. Like, I don't think it's a woman's thing. Like, when I hear a woman being like, accusing a man of raping her or sexually assaulting her or abusing her in the workplace, you instantly say that could be me. And you want to believe them. And the train of thought that you were going on is, I just think it's important to take a step back, because I've seen, as someone that is an advocate for women, wants to empower women to do more, it also does not think that it could be a better time to be women, have seen, especially in universities, how many girls are weaponizing words to take down men that they've accidentally slept with because they also have a boyfriend, and they use it as a quick excuse to kind of get themselves out of trouble, and they don't realize the ramifications that comes out of it, instead of just accepting that they actually did sleep with that guy when they were drunk on the weekend and they cheated on their boyfriend. And there's so many of that happening, and not even at a bigger scale with the military, that you're dealing with a few cases that you also can understand it. If you understand how girls deal with aggression, like how men just like go and beat each other up. Women do it by talking behind each other's backs, by creating these scenarios and manipulating the truth in order to make one girl ostracized and to get buy-in from another group of girls. And when you understand girls' psychology, it's shocking that can be done through the criminal system. But because women have rightfully been given access to power, to be believed, and to be in positions where they can actually advocate for themselves, with that comes abuse. Because when you're looking at women on a $1 million or $1 billion scale of human beings individualized, that's the point that you're making, is that there's a percentage of that in which, because their options are limited, they will use the skills that they've developed throughout their lifetime in order to get what they want within the system that allows them to do that.
Regardless of the consequences.
And
I was talking to a senior police inspector the other day about how, they've been told to make arrests on every allegation, even though when they do a little work, it's not like in the 50s where they didn't take it seriously, right? And that's horrific, right? And the context is, I was abused as a young boy in grade 6 by a man at a bus station. So I can understand the feeling of being abused, and somebody extremely close to me in my family was abused by an employee, sexually abused, and deals with not being believed because of the circumstances. And it just fucking breaks my heart. And I wish I could do more. But so I can empathize with the humanity that exists in these circumstances. But the flip side that you're talking about, and his example I thought was really interesting, because the guy who was charged actually admitted to something. So he was with a female that he was interested in being intimate with. And she liked him, but she said, look, I'm not going to sleep with you unless you love me. And so he thought about it over a week, and this is what he admitted. He said, so I told her I loved her the next week when we went out. and they had sex. And he goes, I'm not sure I loved her. He goes, and then 2 weeks later, I went back to my hometown. I broke up with her, right? And then she said that she didn't consent to that sex. And, like he lied to get sex, right? And I don't know if that undermines consent, lying about loving somebody.
Well, it doesn't.
But imagine in her...
It's a shitty reality.
Yeah.
He doesn't go to jail for that.
No. But in her mind, she's like, I've given myself to you under this pretense of you caring enough for me, and now you've ditched me. And so now a certain percentage of people can hurt you by weaponizing words.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a reality we have to look at to see. And it's so difficult to figure out what happens in a bedroom when there's no injuries, when there's no witnesses. And if you empower one gender to be able to retroactively go back to what happened on a party night where everybody's drunk, and frame it and destroy a human, it's dangerous. That's why you need good lawyers. That's why you need people. That's why I like that we can work.
That's why we need to talk about the reality that humans aren't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to talk about it on both sides. Like, it can't just always be that anyone that ever makes a claim it is therefore right or true or being honest. Like, it's the same. Like, it's the same in reverse of how everyone on death row says they're innocent. Like, humans lie. Mm-hmm. And I've known so many females that have, on both sides, have truly gone through it, because I don't want to minimize that. I do know women that have dealt with it, and it's very serious. And I think that's the point, is that it's very serious. Mm-hmm. And we should be believing in victims, because for the most part, women can't really stand up for themselves when it's in a physical act of violence. Like, that's really where the power imbalance is unfair. Mm-hmm. And we should have a system that just goes through the process as imperfectly as it is. Like, it's imperfect. That's what you're saying. Like, to be in a bedroom and to give consent and to kind of analyze that 11 months later can be very difficult if it's not, like, you weren't drugged or like it was obvious, right? It's complicated. Mm-hmm. But you can't also just believe someone that brings it forward and write them a check and have the person sit in jail and call it a day. Like, it ruins their life.
Yeah, and I think there's no discussion being had. The term sexual assault is a tap on the butt all the way to rape. Yeah. Like, it captures all of that. And so, but what's kind of happened is now anybody can say they're a victim of sexual assault for something that's minor objectively, maybe major to you if you fall apart because somebody touches you on the butt. My daughters were at school in Guelph once, and they had an announcement, emergency announcement, male touched female on the buttocks. Like, they put it through the whole, it's like, that's like, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, rape or serious sexual assault, right? I know it's all serious, but the one that is, to be raped is so different than somebody to tap you on the butt.
Like,
and
someone has to be honest about it. Like, it doesn't make me comfortable. You've invaded my personal space, but it's not the same thing. Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. And then when you put the criminal justice system over it, if somebody is raped and they go to the hospital the next day, get a rape kit, tell people what's happening, that case can be dealt with. The problem is if somebody was raped years ago and they were in a position where they couldn't come forward, right? Like children who have been raped by somebody.
And that's a difficult really case. Serious.
Yeah, that's a tough case to prove.
Being raped is really serious.
Yeah.
And being sexually assaulted is really serious.
Yeah, no, I know firsthand.
Like it's really serious. And that's not the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is I've seen firsthand, you've represented firsthand an abundance of cases that go too far in the system, that are taking up too much time, that is taking away from true crimes, taxpayer dollars. The system that needs to run properly because of a gray area in the reality that people do abuse it. And I know that it is difficult to prove. I know that it's hard.
It's impossible to prove innocence.
No, hear me out. I'm not. It's a bit of a broken system, and there isn't a way to fix this. That to prove that it isn't correct, it still has to go through the system. Right? Like that's, I think, but I think that there's not a big enough conversation happening to stop people from not moving forward with the accusation because they're not afraid enough. Like if you're
There's no consequence.
there's no consequence.
It's almost impossible to prove a false allegation. If you say 10 years ago this happened, there's no objective evidence that can be looked at. It becomes the he said, she said.
But she's not even penalized.
That's what I mean. Because
yeah.
Because it becomes the he said, she said, and they're like, oh, well, we kind of believe him and not her. He's not guilty. But she's then not charged for a wrongful allegation, right? Or making a false statement.
Yeah.
But what we've done is we've allowed that to happen, but I find in my practice, working at both sides gives me a visibility that the people who only believe victims don't have an objective, because when it comes to cross-examining a perpetrator or somebody who's making something up, like having seen it from both sides, like I can destroy somebody who's making up an allegation for their own sense, because I've seen real victims. Like I've cried with them, like I've heard it. And so it's so visceral when you can tell somebody is making shit up and they're a bad person manipulating it. And so when those people get on the stand, I'm expert at dealing with that. Likewise, having defended men who are innocent, and we've actually been able to prove they're innocent by hiring private investigators, and I know the pain they're going through. It's visceral. So when a man goes on the stand who's a fucking abuser, like I know how to destroy that human as well, because they're liars, they're predators.
And you do. I even hate that we can't have this conversation without fear of being like eviscerated by the public. And I think that's the point. That's the reason why we need to have more of these conversations. Like we need this dialogue to enter the zeitgeist, so that like race, like sexuality issues, like transgender issues, regardless of where your stance are, it's a part of the zeitgeist in the ongoing conversation, so that as a collective,
we have a good dialogue.
We have a good dialogue where we're working through it. And it's crazy to me that this hasn't entered the fold. And when it comes to like the best in the industry, which you are, you're able to help, but the effort, the work, the expertise you're putting into it, you can't represent the level of which this is getting to the criminal justice system. And we need to have an open conversation about this, because girls need to be held accountable for not giving wrongful accusations because she wanted to date him and he didn't want to date her.
Mm-hmm. No, the discussions, the tough discussions have to happen. And the risk that I run sometimes is everybody is angry at me. So I have police officers who are angry at me for defending somebody they think is innocent. And then I have institutions angry at me for suing them for allowing sexual assault. But it's funny. I was on a police officer podcast the other day, and the guy had been critical of some things I did until one of his best friends had just been wrongfully accused, and realized how difficult it is to get through the system. Like your perspective changes when you understand the other side.
Yeah. And that's what I was trying to convey in the beginning. Is I never thought innocent people could be dragged through the system. Like you never think it could be you. And until you're working at a law firm and you see the cases, you see the evidence, like you see things where it's not like your gut and how you feel because you're on the defense side, like just the objectively what's there. And then when the judge ruled and the jury rules in your favor and you weren't crazy, right? Like it's crazy to think that, but that's why we have to have the conversation. Because it doesn't matter what the administrator thinks in the school. Like if we're not having a conversation of the reality of what's happening in your profession and what you're seeing getting into the criminal justice system, they don't know how to act. And that's why having this conversation is important. And it's not anti-women. It's not pro-man. It's
pro-human.
It's pro-human. It's pro-human.
Yeah.
Totally.
We have to deal with bad actors in society wherever they are, but they're not in just one camp or the other, or one party or the other, or one generation or the other. They're spread out across humanity, and we all have to have the courage to stand up to injustice.
And that's why I before we wrap up, I think quickly just like really re-explaining that, because you're very intelligent, and I think sometimes you're speaking at almost a different frequency than where people are kind of, because this is a good deep conversation. If biologically there's only men and women, objectively one gender can't be perfect and the other is evil. And I think the dialogue for feminism has gone too far in that it has to be an anti-men club. And I don't subscribe any longer to female only anything, because that's not a reality or reflection of life. And it's actually not what I want. To be an independent and empowered female, you need to be able to work with men, period. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot that I can learn from men to improve my journey through life, right? Like the accepting the ability to be disagreeable, the to say no in uncomfortable situations, to assert myself. I no longer see it as a men's world. Like I'm a businesswoman. I see
you know what you're saying away, and obviously there'll be some trolls at some point. It's what you're saying is the way to protect women is not just to make them perpetual victims. It's actually to empower them to operate in these areas with confidence, and intellect, right? Yes. So be strong, be disagreeable, don't get hammered. You know what I mean? Like in certain ways, like be smart to conduct yourself in a way that protects yourself and advances yourself. But we've kind of victimized everything, so that there's no accountability in one gender and all the accountability is in another for what's going on.
No, exactly. And
it's a dangerous time for young boys in school because there's so much hard alcohol going in there.
And girls are drinking almost on par.
And they're smaller and they get drunk.
It's really hard to navigate. Like, I mean, I went through university more recently than you did. And it was scary to see, like, girls are doing them, like they feel empowered. They're going out, they're drinking hard. They may be doing some drugs. It's hard to kind of understand where consent begins and ends. And if both sides are absolutely hammered, who is the onus on? And it's difficult. I've seen lots of women where they're going out to make bad decisions, and that's kind of the MO of the evening. Is like, they all go to a pregame together, and they're just going to just honestly let go and like just not have any accountability on their actions. And that's a dangerous game to play on both sides. Like, it's dangerous.
Yeah, I had a case where two people got extremely drunk, almost both blackout. And so Malcolm Gladwell's got a book, Talking to Strangers, that examines the science behind being blackout and how you can have no memory, but you can actually have full conversations with people, right? And so you have no memory of what you said when you wake up the next day, but you had full conversations with people, which I think is really relevant to some of these cases. But this judge got angry at me when we ended up winning the case, because what usually happens is a woman says, look, I don't remember what happened last night, but I can tell we had sex. And then goes to police and say, I didn't consent because I don't remember. And then what happens, unfortunately, sometimes there are guys who take advantage of passed out women. They're rapists. They should go to jail.
Totally.
But there are two people who get very drunk and have sex and don't really remember much of it the next morning. But then when they go and they interview the young lad, he tries to reconstruct the evening. And so trying to be helpful, he's like, yeah, we went out there and we had a bunch of drinks here and then we went here and she seemed fine. And then he's like, I don't really remember much, but then we went and she was saying yes and she was touching me, but did she actually say yes? I can't remember. And so bam, you're charged with sexual assault. And what I told one gentleman, because he didn't have a memory, I'm like, don't try to reconstruct it, right? So if she goes to the police and says, I don't remember what happened, but we had sex the night before, if you talk, you're going to get charged. But if you say, I don't remember what happened because I was drunk, how do you know what happened?
No, exactly. It's
right. And we actually won the case and the judge got so angry. But I'm like, no, this is actually it. Two people got hammered and don't remember what happened. Like, it doesn't, it could be the case that the guy was like falling asleep and a female wanted, you know what I mean? Like, it could be the case if you don't remember, but what's happening is the guys are getting kicked out of school the second of the accusation. They got a bad lawyer, they get convicted, they get a record of something very serious, and it ruins their life. So anyhow, it's a tough conversation. I hope people can respect that we're trying to talk about issues from a kind place to help all people.
The dialogue to stay open-minded. Like, that's all this conversation is about. Is it's not about you and the person that's like perceiving this and listening to this. It's about what's happening right now. And I'm sure the person listening to this, you would never do that. And I would never do that. And you would never do that. Like there's people that
But
are
we know
doing
people
it.
who have been abused and people who have been wrongfully accused.
Yeah. And we're not talking enough about the wrongfully accused, and we need to, because it's a slippery slope. I mean, and again, this is not anti-women, because I'm very pro-women, but just quickly to your point, I have a lot of friends that have been drinking hard since high school, who can like drink hard liquor, who are like tiny, beautiful girls, like literally tiny, who you can never tell when they're blackout. And I'm a loser. I'm a lightweight. I start barfing right away. But I can never match them, and they don't even get hungover the next day. And it's again, I'm not saying this for anything other than I can't conceptualize the reality of all these experiences and stories and whatever is happening on a Friday night within the thousands of universities throughout North America. But from my own perspective, I could never be in a place where I would be that hammered and you wouldn't be able to know, because like I just can't keep my shit together. But when I'm again thinking of numbers and thinking about the variance of human beings and the different personality types and what they've been through life to make them who they are and how they navigate life moving forward, even that small piece is like, shit, this is complicated. It's complicated.
It is. So, send the podcast to somebody who might be interested in this topic. And I think always the takeaway is, if you have been abused or if you're innocent, the quality of your lawyer could be the most important decision you make in your life. Until next time, thank you for joining us, Ms. Moore. Good leadership means having the courage to sometimes piss people off.
This is the Rogue Layer Podcast.